So it all started with this. I had been exploring different ways of doing applique, particularly hand applique, and I was using Japanese family crest designs, or kamon, to do my experiments. This was one of the ones I chose for that project, and there was something about this design that really appealed to me. So I decided I was going to make a whole quilt using this design and making these in different colorways. So this video is about how I chose the fabrics, prepared the applique pieces, and then how I put them all together into a design. It's been a long process. I'm coming here from the future in this video to do this introduction because I forgot to do one. But I'll come back at the end and let you know my next steps. Whoops, had a microphone problem. I'm showing you my collection of gradient fabrics. The vast majority of them are from Jennifer Sampo from her Sky collection, and this is made by Robert Kaufman. I'm going to be cutting out pieces from 3 different parts of each segment of fabric, and also on some of these gradients, I'm able to get 6 pieces out, so enough for 2 blocks. I've been able to make 15 of the arcs from this one piece of template plastic. So I'm just showing you how I trace onto the template plastic and then cut it out. And I mentioned how important it is to cut the edges as smoothly as possible because the bump in the template plastic tends to show up on your finished ironed edge because you're ironing over it, of course. And here is where I admit to being lazy and not ironing my fabric ahead of time. So I'm going to choose 3 different spots from this selection of fabric to cut out my arc pieces. Make sure I have enough for a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. And I just use masking tape and stick it onto the back. When I first started doing this, I was actually marking around it before I cut it out. But then I realized I could just eyeball it and do it with the rotary cutter. Just watch your fingers. I would take the first piece that I cut out and then put it on top of where the next piece is going to come to make sure there was enough difference in the 2 colors, because I kind of wanted a light, a medium, and a dark. And again, that's just an estimated 1/4 inch seam allowance. So when it comes time to ironing it, I'm just going to stick the piece on the back with the same kind of tape and then go through my whole process of preparing the edges. So I'm on the home stretch now for ironing over the pieces of this circles quilt. I've got pieces for 34 circles here. And then I have 2 more circles to iron and finish, to finish the edges. And then I can put it all on the design board and try to arrange it and then think about what they're going to be sewed onto. That's pretty important. It hasn't been decided yet. And I've got a pretty good selection of colors here. I have a lot of blues just because this is all taken from fabrics in my collection already. And I just have a lot of blue fabric. But there's some other colors in here. I don't think red is very well represented, and neither is yellow, but we'll see what it just gets us, and it is what it is. So I've settled on the technique that I've used for creating these points using the iron over method, so I'm going to show you that right now. It's been a long haul, I'll tell you that much. Here's the process. So I get a nice little bowl full of starch, just using this Niagara starch. Got my little brush. Okay, so there we've got it taped on there like that. Then I'm going to take my little snips and I'm going to put a few snips about a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch apart on this inside curve. And I am not snipping all the way to the template. I am just snipping almost to the template just to help ease the fabric around that curve. And then I'm going to do it on this curve as well. And I've learned that it's best to start at one of the points. Get some starch on my brush, and I just cover this first point. A little bit down that way, a little bit down that way. What I found works best, at least for me, is to go under and fold just over that point right there. I hold it there until it sizzles and I feel like it's all ironed in place. Now, I admit this is very fussy. I kind of go in and I clean that up a little. I cut a little bit off of it so there's less stuff getting folded over. Then I might trim this a little bit so it's a nice lean seam allowance. Then I go over this again and I'm going to kind of hold it lightly down with my thumb where it came over the point. I'm going to pop under it and fold it over and hold it there. I'm going to come over here and do some of this curve right here. And because I'm a lefty, I work clockwise, so I'm going to go around this way, around the piece. I am going to trim off some of this seam allowance because we want to create a point here and we don't want all this fabric bunching up the point. So I'm cutting off this little triangle like that. Now sometimes I will do this, I will pull this part back out and there's this little dog ear here and I will cut part of that off as well. There. So it just looks like that. Then I tuck it back in there because that got folded over when I ironed. Go ahead and do this one. Now I'm going to just press this side of it where I folded it over just to make it remember where it folded. Then I'm going to hold it down here, scoop up the fabric, press it over, and hope for the best. There we go. I'm going to come up this way. I'm not going to go all the way up though, so I'm just going to leave it like this. Then I'm going to fold this one over and iron that down, trim it a little bit. Now yes, you could trim it before you do this, but I'd rather have too much fabric and trim it back than too little fabric at the point. I'm going to paint this again, hold it down right here at the point of the plastic where the fabric's covering it, pop it over. Trim some of this back. That's pretty much what I've trimmed off. Re-starch it. Come back and make it remember this little fold over. Then I'm going to come back, hold that down, and push it over. And I have not burned my fingers, surprisingly. I tried doing it with the tip of my seam ripper, but I like the control that my finger gives me. But I will use the seam ripper at this point. You can use a stiletto. This is going to help pull the fabric around the curve. This part doesn't take as long. It's definitely not as fussy. I'm going to grab the fabric, pull it over as I bring the iron towards it. So far I have a nice clean edge right there. That's just what I wanted. Probably have too much fabric here, but I can trim that back later. This is where if you have too much fabric, you can get these little bunchy bits right here. Here's how it looks. Of course, we need to finish up these corners. So what I usually do here is I pull it out from the big fat end here. Gently kind of take it out of the corners. I repress it from where it flared out when I pulled it out. Just kind of go over the edge a little bit. And I think what I'm going to do is trim a little of this fat seam allowance. We don't need that. I don't want any of this showing through the fabric. It's not a problem with these darker fabrics, but on my lighter pieces I definitely trimmed it down so that the seam that you see underneath doesn't look crooked. Okay, so here we are at these corners. So what I'm going to do is gently lift up this part. You see that? This is what I'm going to trim back a little so it doesn't show. Be very, very careful here. So I turned off that much. You look over here, you can still see a little bit showing through. I'm going to trim a teensy bit more. So after that, Give it another iron. Check it out. Nice point. So then I go over to the other one, do the same thing, gently lift the top part that's folded over. Then I give that a little press. And then I think, oh, I just can trim a little bit more. And then I trim too much and I regret it. Okay, my brain is saying stop, stop, stop. So there is a finished piece. I think this method ended up being the right one to use for this, and it's going to make sewing it on so much easier because the edges are already done. So I'm going to get busy, finish my final ones, then it's going to be time to arrange it on the design board. This is going to take a while. I think I'm going to do a time lapse of this. The tricky thing is each one is composed of 3 pieces, and so moving these around is going to be a bit of a pain. So I thought what I would do is get them up kind of by color, and then if I wasn't happy with that, which I'm sure I won't be, you know, just the first time I put it up, what I'm going to do is take a picture of it and then divide the picture into all the different little circles and move them around on a page on my computer. And that way I can arrange them more easily instead of moving all the 3 pieces around. Because in total there's 108 pieces here, 36 circles, each one with 3 pieces. So. It's all on the board now, but the arrangement is not final at all. I am definitely going to have to take a picture, cut the picture into pieces into each individual circle, and then load it into probably Inkscape so that I can move the pieces around and arrange them that way, because 108 pieces is not doable for me for rearranging. What else? Also, I have to decide if there are too many of one color, or if one color is not represented enough for me. So I may have to make a few more pieces. And I also have to decide on the background. I think it's going to end up being pieced squares, and each circle will be within an individual square. But the variation of the colors of the squares, that is still up in the air. Now I'm going to take that picture and then I'm going to get on the computer. So here's the background fabric, and I love it. This is a 3-yard cut of Jennifer Sampo's Storm, and I've used a lot of her fabrics in making the various circles for this quilt, so I think they're going to look really nice when put onto this background. I had considered at one point leaving this uncut and just arranging the pieces on it like that. But what I think I'm going to do, because I'm not sure yet if I'm going to be using sashing, I am going to cut this into 9.5-inch squares. And I think I can get 4 from edge to edge of the fabric. So I should have plenty of fabric to do that. And then I will be placing the different colored circles and trying them on the different squares to see what they look best on. And then I will be arranging that into something that, I don't know, pleases my eyes. So I am now going to go to my cutting table and try to square up this piece of fabric and cut it. This is a big piece to manage. I'm not the greatest cutter, but I'm going to work on my skills with this big piece of fabric. So over to my table. I have put my 2 design boards together, and they are attached to the rolly cart that I made this whole setup in a video. I'll link to it below. So what I'm going to be doing next is I have all of these squares that I cut out, and I am going to put them on the board kind of maybe randomly right now. I don't know. Let me put it on time lapse and let me see what happens. This is kind of a feel your way along as you go kind of process. That was fun. It's like arranging the sky. This is probably not going to be a final arrangement. And what I need to do next is take my big pile of applique pieces and figure out how I'm going to put them on here. I did have an order that I came to using the computer because I had taken pictures of all of these. And I can try putting them in that order. That really went from light to dark. I don't know what would look better. If I had the lightest applique pieces on the darkest, or if I had the lightest on the lightest. I really don't know. And this is going to be kind of cumbersome because each one has 3 pieces. So I'm going to have to use pins to stick them up. Definitely can't turn the ceiling fan on. I'm just going to stop the video while I think about this. This is pretty important. I ended up making so many changes and making myself so confused that I just ended up taking all of the pieces off of the background fabric, and I arranged them onto the table here so that I could try to make better sense of them and put them in little trios. One more thing that I noticed when I was working on the design board and really looking at these pieces is I noticed that some of the it's just irresistible to a cat. Oh, okay, move on. You can do it. So what I noticed is that some of the fabrics are a little dead looking compared to the rest of them. These particular dark purplish blues have been giving me a lot of trouble in terms of how they look when they were on the design board. I'm going to have another route through my fabric. Maybe I can replace them with something that's a little more vibrant, or not vibrant, but a little bit more lively in terms of the color variation within this dark tone. I was making another piece for this circle right here, and I made it backwards on the template. So now I have this little outlier here. I don't know, sad face. I spent all of yesterday agonizing over the colors. This is not the order that it's going to be in. I'm going to make one more circle, that's 3 pieces worth of yellow, and take out one of these blues down here that don't work. I also need to make a replacement for here. Also, this one right here in this green. I didn't have enough green in the quilt. I've also been thinking a lot about the sashing. Cutting up the background fabric, I have lots of nice 9.5 inch strips now. That was extra. And I'm thinking what I'll probably do is a 3-inch wide sashing, and then I'll have darker sashing like that between the lighter blocks, and then I'll have lighter sashing between the darker blocks. But the problem is when you get to the middle, these middle blocks, I definitely have some of those extra, but it just really kind of blends in there. So I may have to continue more of the darker here and more of the lighter here and not use any of the middle color from this gradient fabric. But what suddenly occurred to me was, and I can't believe I didn't think about this before, was that the very first quilt I made was appliqued circles or Chinese coin shape onto different color backgrounds. Like here I am again, I'm appliquing a circle shape, albeit a different circle shape, but there must be something that does something to my brain that I really like it. My next quilt, I really need to branch out and try something completely different. No gradient effect and no applique circles. I'm still trying to decide if I am going to piece the background first and then applique the circles on, and that way I can really find the true center of each block, or if I should applique onto individual squares and then sew them into a whole quilt. I think what I need to do is just double check to make sure that my squares I cut out are nice and square and even. If they are, then I don't know, I'm still torn, so I'll come back to that. Sometimes you just have to stop and draw a line under the whole process. I probably could have spent the rest of my life rearranging these circles or the pieces within the circles or the background fabrics. But for now, this is satisfactory for me. And I really want to get on to the hand stitching part. Initially, I had all the dark background fabric at the top and then did a gradient down to the light at the bottom. There was something about it that wasn't pleasing. So I decided to mix up the background fabrics. I think it gives the background a little bit more life. And I also decided that since I had mixed up the background colors and it wasn't all dark, all medium, all light, I really didn't need to have sashing. So what I'm going to do is just sew them directly together. Also, what I've decided is that I'll be sewing the background squares together before I hand applique the circle pieces on. Next steps, obviously I'm going to go to my sewing machine, get them all sewn together. Then I'm going to use Applique glue, I think, to get things perfectly placed within each circle. And then I am going to start the hand stitching. And this is going to be a real decorative process because this particular kamon, and I'll put a picture up here, has stitching lines on it that give it some definition. And that's what I'm going to be doing with the hand quilting. Be sure to let me know if you are working on any hand applique or hand quilting projects right now. And as always, if you have any tips or suggestions for me, I wholeheartedly welcome them. They're very helpful. So I will see you next time when I am working on the hand applique and the hand quilting for this project. Bye.